Welcome. Welcome. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from a distinguished global executive, thought leader, and author, John Thompson. With a career spanning top organizations like EY, CSL Behring, Dell, IBM, SAP, Nielsen, and more, he's been at the forefront of AI, data, and technology innovation. Beyond the corporate world, he's an adjunct professor at the University of Michigan and the author of 5 books, including his latest, which we're going to dive into today, The Path to AGI. His leadership has driven multi-million dollar deals in industry leading innovations. A trusted advisor at Gartner and here at James Dewayne Group as well, he's shaped strategy, investment, and growth for organizations worldwide. A chapter of my book, Ringmaster of AI, which you see over my shoulder, featured one of our Sweet Speak conversations, and he wrote the foreword to that book as well. So I'd like to welcome John Thompson back to Sweet Speak. Welcome, John.
Thanks, JD. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. And I want to dive right on in. You and I have talked, over the last year or so about the concept of your book, the Path to AGI. What was the main driver behind getting this out?
It's a great question and a wonderful place to start our conversation. I had been hearing numerous people out there, well known people. I'll try not to throw many people under the bus during this session, but saying, AGI is going to be here in 6 months, AGI is going to be here in a year, AGI is here now. You hear, futurists like Ray Kurzweil and others, out there saying AGI is imminent and we're going to have it. And as you said in your intro, I've been doing this for nearly 40 years. And, traditional AI, foundational AI, analytical AI has all sorts of different labels, has been around for 70 years. So it's not something that is just going to jump out and bite us in a day. And it's not going to be clear when we have it. Those things are going to be obvious when it happens. And I thought to myself, I don't agree with what these people are saying. So I thought, I'm going to spend some time really thinking about it, researching it, and I'm going to write a book about it. And I'm going to put out in the marketplace my view on when we will have AGI because I'm very confident. I'm an optimist. I believe that we will have AGI, but it will be quite a while.
You break AI into 3 pillars: foundational AI, generative AI, causal AI. Can you explain these in terms of how each of these contribute to the path to AGI?
Absolutely. Another great question. Thanks, JD. Foundational AI, as I call it, is called analytical AI or classical AI by others. And that's the things that we've known for the past 70 years. That's clustering, classification, neural networks, all those different Markov models. Those are all in there. And that's a cornerstone of our predictive capabilities. And that's a well developed pantheon of algorithms and data approaches and things of that nature. Generative AI is, when you talk to people today, most people, when they talk about AI, they're talking about generative AI. That's kind of sucked up all the oxygen in the room for the last 2+ years, which is fine. But everybody needs to understand that generative AI is a subset of foundational AI because generative AI is all based on neural networks. But it's grown so big and it's gotten so much press and it's really been impressive in what it can do. So it's its own pillar of or family of AI now. And then causal AI is a whole new Judea Pearl at UCLA has been the driver of this change, this development. He and his cohorts have created an entirely new family of or branch of calculus. So causal AI is really important for AGI because causal AI allows us to mathematically model causality. Now, a lot of us think, oh, well, we understand causality. I put my finger on a hot stove and I get burned. Okay, well, it's cause and effect. It's pretty clear. But when you really think about cause and effect and modeling it mathematically, it's hard. It's really hard to figure out. And you get people that say, oh, I understand counterfactuals and I get this and I understand selection bias versus treatment bias, and it's not a very well understood area, but it's crucial to where we're going. So each of these families of AI has a component that we need to move towards AGI. We need the causality. We need to understand causality. We need the scale and the dynamism of foundational AI. We need the explainability of neurosymbolic AI. Honestly, when you sit down and really think about AGI and what it is, we don't have everything we need. And that's why it's going to take us quite some time, because what we have is impressive, but we're not there yet.
Let's dive into that a little bit more because you state that AGI won't be here for decades, if not centuries. What are the biggest technical and philosophical hurdles that make AGI so difficult to achieve?
Well, let's define it. We're talking about it, so let's define it so our audience and we know what we're talking about. AGI, I agree with everybody. Elon Musk, Ray Kurzweil, Sam Altman, we're all in agreement that, AGI is when AI acts or responds or operates in a way that it is as good as an above average person. So it does everything that you would expect a college age graduate to do: respond intelligently, have empathy, understand that, hey, you and I talked maybe 6 months ago and we talked about X, Y, and Z. It should have a memory of that. And part of the problems that we have today is that, number one, our technologies are siloed. Gen AI, causal AI, foundational AI, none of them are integrated. But what we see and what we're starting to see now is practitioners are actually taking foundational AI and grafting causal AI on it. And they're taking foundational AI and grafting Gen AI on it. So it's almost like a did you ever build those models when you were a kid of rockets or cars? It's
Oh,
almost like that. We're kind of taking a rocket and a car and gluing them together in our basement or in our garage. So, that is not something that's going to scale. But what we do see now is vendors looking at this, and over the next 5 to 10 years, vendors that are good in one of the flavors of AI or families of AI are going to bring others in and graft them on. So my view is that over the next 10 to 30 years, we're going to have vendors that say, oh, well, I have Gen AI and I have causal. I have foundational and I have causal. I have all three, and we're going to end up with those integrated together. So I think that's one technological wave that will need to happen. Another thing that needs to happen is that, over the 40 years I've been doing this, and we've put in over 100, I think it's up to about 120 now, predictive analytic applications into production. The ones that have been most successful are the ones that have integrated somewhere between 7 and 20 different data sets. So models are what we're going for, what we're trying to strive for, and many people probably don't even think about this, is that we're trying to build models that approximate how we think. you know, you get up in the morning, we all get up in the morning, and we swing our legs out of bed and we put our feet on the floor and we go, oh, it's a little cold this morning. I might want to put on some socks. Or, I'm getting out of bed and I need to go to the bathroom first, or I'm thirsty, or I'm hungry. We make these decisions, in milliseconds. And we need models to do the same thing. So a model needs, we do this with just, atmospheric and light and our bodily functions and things like that in milliseconds. Models need to do the same thing. But to do that, they're going to need much more information because they're less effective and efficient than the wetware we have in our heads. So, number one, we got to integrate all these AI families together. Number two, we have to understand that just bringing one data set or two data sets or three data sets, not going to cut it. We have to have lots of data and it has to be integrated together in a way that the models can use that. And the last thing I'll say, and we could go on for the rest of our conversation with this question, but is memory. Some of us have really good memories, some of us have faulty memories. For the most part, AI has no memory right now. So that's one of the problems is that, you show up at your prompt window one day and you type in all this stuff and you go through a thread of discussion and analyze a situation and you get some really interesting and good results back. Half hour later, you come back after you've had a donut or a coffee or a run or whatever it is, and AI doesn't know you.
yeah. So that I guess that brings my next question because there's a lot of breakthroughs happening every day when it comes to AI. What are some of the most promising breakthroughs happening, you know, today that are moving us incrementally towards AGI?
Yeah, models are really racing forward. Before it was like we were dribbling along doing some things. We just had this exponential spike in advancements in models. When you first used Chat GPT and you ask it what 2 plus 2 was, it might have said 7, or it might have said Wednesday, or it might have said something really, not even sensical. But that was because the models weren't trained on those data sets. The early large language models had no math functions in them whatsoever. And that tend to, blow people's minds. But, the models are bringing in much more information, which that's a great thing. They get smarter, they get broader, they get deeper. That's wonderful. There's one thing that I'm pro on, but I don't like the way it's being talked about. I'm a bit of a pedant in that way, and that, people talk about reasoning models. Well, models don't reason. They are not having independent thought. I'm not going to go around and fight all the vendors on the terminology, but the models are inferring. That's what they're doing. Is they're doing inference, and they're doing it on steroids, and they're doing it a billion times a second, depending on how much compute power you have behind it, which is great, and I think it's wonderful. I'm a little miffed that they named it reasoning, because it's not reasoning, but okay, fine, we'll go away from that. So I think reasoning models are a really interesting development. And I was at a conference yesterday in New York, and we were talking about this, and it really struck me the way that the audience was talking about it. Is that we had some conversations maybe 6 months ago that prompt engineering was the new thing. Well, prompt engineering was never a thing. It's either you think, you have cogent, tight, logical thinking, or you have sloppy thinking. If you're a programmer, a developer, or if you just have a proclivity for that kind of thinking, you're going to be better at stimulating models, because you're going to have tighter thought processes. You're going to write better, prompts for the system. So prompt engineering, not really a thing anymore, but writing good inputs into models, always a good thing. So, I think prompting, let's drop the word engineering. Prompting is going to be important, because you can actually drive a model to do reasoning and thought processing and chain of thoughts and chain of inference and all these other kind of things by just doing your job better. So models will react better if you do a good job with them. So I think prompting is something that people are getting better. Reasoning models are something that's very exciting. And then the last thing I'll say on this topic is agents. Agents are very, very interesting. I think that most people don't understand the implications of agents. The way I try to describe it to people is that agents can do anything a person can do. And if you really think about it, that's quite intriguing. They can bind you to a contract, they can spend money, they can interface with other programs, they can interface with people. So I think agents and agentic workflows are very exciting as well.
So if AGI is so far away, what do you think is more realistic milestone for AI in the next, let's say, 10 years? You're talking prompting, reasoning, agentic. What do you think is the most realistic milestone for AI?
I think composite AI, what we talked about earlier, where, tech vendors bring together the three flavors of AI, all the ones we've talked about: foundational, generative, causal. They bring it together in one workbench or one environment. And what that's going to drive is that, if we had composite AI, where you just go to a vendor and say, I want your AI environment, and we get all of it in one shot, what that's going to do is it's going to drive users to understand the holes in data that we have. And it's also going to help vendors understand how to make those systems interact with each other better in real time. So I think composite AI, I was talking at this conference, and they're like, wow, you really seem like a downer. You're really a pessimist on AI. And I said, I'm not. I said, I'm really actually very excited about AI and AGI. I just want people to understand that this is a hard problem. So we've been working on this for 70 years and we have another 120 to go. So I find that invigorating that I'm going to work the rest of my career and have interesting and fun things to do. So I don't think that's a bummer.
Everyone's an AI company now. It's kind of like back, in the day when everybody became a technology. KFC said they were a technology company,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. A
They
bad
happen to
one,
make chicken,
but yeah.
right? People, are misleading others about AI's progress. What do you think are some of the biggest myths or fear mongering narratives that you're seeing spread today that we really have to nip in the bud?
Well, I think the whole discussion of AGI is borders on irresponsible. You hear people that are raising billions of dollars talk about it, and that smacks of a conflict of interest right there. You're telling people, "Oh, I'm going to have this in the next 6 months," and of course you won't. So I think I think that's problematic. And then I think also, jumping off the previous thread of discussion we had there, I think it discourages young people from getting into the field. They think, well, it's all been developed and it's all done, and there's no reason for me to get into it. There's nothing interesting and fun to do in that area, and there's nothing further from the truth. I mean, if my I mean, Rodney Brooks is out there saying he thinks AGI is 130 years away. At least I'm optimistic at 120. So he's clearly smarter than I am. He started MIT CSAIL Institute. He's created a number of companies, and he said, look, this should not be discouraging. This is interesting work that is hard, that's challenging, that is fun to be engaged in. And we should be positioning that to all the young people out there to say, hey, you should, all this conversation about, here's another one, we'll never need another developer in 6 months because AI is going to generate all the code we ever need. And I'm like, oh my God, it couldn't be further from the truth. We need more developers than ever. We need more data scientists. We need more young people, young men and women going into STEM. This whole idea that the whole world is going to be generated by a model is, as I said, bordering on irresponsible.
Yeah, great question from our audience. What key factors could either speed up AGI, this groundbreaking achievement, or hold it back?
Well, everybody generally in every conversation I have always brings up, well, hey, quantum is there. I'm like, yep, quantum's there. And for my whole life, and I am a big fan of quantum computing. It's going to be the next breakthrough in 5 years, and it's been that way for the last 20. So I would love quantum to come to the fore and actually work in a commercial setting. And if it does, then hallelujah. And I'd like to see all the fields jump forward. So quantum could be an accelerator, but I don't, I'm a fan, but I'm skeptical. So I think
You know,
that's, one of them.
when we look at AI in general today, and our conversation today is different than when you and I first sat down nearly a year ago talking about this. From a business perspective, what industries do you think stand to gain the most from AI's continued evolution?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I have people ask me all the time, what's the most important use case? What is the process that we should be applying AI to? What are the systems we reinvigorate with AI? And I flip that on its head. And I say, well, which ones shouldn't you do it with? Because the AI applies to all of them. So then, people give me that, look where they're very dissatisfied with my answer. And then I go on and say, it really depends on what is your biggest strategic challenge. Is it, customer to cash? Is it, product to placement? Is it profitability? Is it forecasting? All of these things can be addressed with either foundational AI or Gen AI or causal AI or all three. So, often I talk to data scientists and they're like, oh gosh, I just don't know what to choose. It's a target rich environment. And I said, well, lucky you, lot to work on. But go to your VP of sales or your head of manufacturing or your person that owns supply chain and sit down and have a coffee with them or have lunch. And I can guarantee you within the first 5 minutes, they're going to tell you what their problems are.
When we talk AI, it's hard not to bring in the ethical concerns. So, as AI continues to evolve, what are those ethical concerns that businesses and governments should prioritize, even if AGI is still far off?
You know, AI, AGI, all flavors of AI are going to be either improved or gated by data. And I don't think that we have gotten, our government certainly hasn't. The EU is doing a better job, and Australia is even doing a better job than the EU in putting legislation in place that protects people who own the data. And we all own our data. That was my third book, Data for All. Trying to make it clear to everybody that, the information that you put into Facebook, your credit card information, your credit rating information, your browsing history, your medical records, they're all yours. You own all of them. And people don't seem to understand that. So I think we need to get, this is not a good way to say it, but I think we need to get religion, around data ownership. And people need to stand up for it and say, yeah, I want my monetization of my data. I want to protect my data. I want it the right to be forgotten, and I want to make sure that my data is treated ethically. And I think that is almost the foundation of everything that comes from privacy and ethics and all those different kind of things. If we get that right, many of the downstream problems will take care of themselves. So I think that's where we start.
Great question from our audience. How can we reshape education to keep humans relevant and thriving in this scenario? And also, what skills or unique skills and knowledge should we embrace to coexist and excel alongside AGI?
Great question. As you mentioned in the introduction, I am teaching at the University of Michigan, and I that's on my second book, and I put a proposal on the table for the administration to consider that the next class I want to teach is critical thinking. And I think we need to teach these, we need to teach the STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, all the way down at the primary school level. And I think we need to teach critical thinking as well, because we have whole generations of people coming up that, things come up on the screen from the internet, things come out of models, they take them as verbatim. They believe these things that are they say they are true, and they could be true, they might be true. Models are probabilistic, and some of the things that come out of them are true, many of them are not. So I think we need to teach critical thinking to people, number one. And well, we need to teach STEM first and foremost, all the STEM disciplines. Critical thinking, number two. And then number three, we need to teach people how to connect with other people. And number four, we need to have people understand that these models are not our overlords. They are tools that we use just like a calculator. If you really get down to it and look at some of the models that are out there today, and many of the large language models, they're no smarter than your calculator. And that's the way you should treat them.
People like you and I, we've been around this for a long time, and we can talk about that 120 years you're talking about before AGI comes into play. Talk to me about your students' perspective, right? They can they wrap their minds around AGI, knowing that wow, that's 120 years. They're more focused on today. Talk to me about their perception.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so grateful for the University of Michigan to allow me to teach there. I have students that are 18 years old, and I'm in boardrooms with people who are 80 years old. So, I get to see the full spectrum of the adult experience in AI. And you're right. The undergraduates and the graduate students in at Michigan and other places where I end up in classrooms, they are very concerned about their careers. They're concerned about getting jobs. They're concerned about AI taking entry level jobs. And I explained to them, I said, yes, that I think that there's a concern there, but it's a momentary point in time. Everybody's got, AI fever right now. But at some point, they have to realize that, you do need to hire young people. You do need to train them. You do need to give them opportunities to be critical and strategic parts of your business. So it's not like we're going to stop hiring young people. And actually, I don't think the problem is really in that area. I think the problem is more like for people like you and me. And I don't worry about it. I'm an AI expert. I'm good. I've been doing this for a long time. I'll be fine. But there are people who are working in functions like accounting and logistics and pricing who are not AI experts. And if those people either don't want to or can't become AI enabled, their jobs are at risk. So I'm not so worried about the young people, and I try to do my best to assuage their fears because they are real and their concerns are very front and center to them. But I think as far as practical job loss, I think it's people that are in their 50s and above is really where the concern is for the short term.
For these younger students, those looking to build a career in AI, what skills or areas of expertise do you think will be most valuable in the coming years for those individuals?
As I don't, I mean, I'm not I'm not negative on developers. I think we need lots and lots of developers. I tend to try to steer people towards data science, because it's not a developer job, but it is a job that drives you to think mathematically and critically. And it's not as if you have to be a math genius to be a data scientist, but you do have to think rigorously. So, one of my best friends is a professor out of a Instituto de Empresa in Spain, and he's a huge proponent of liberal arts education because he feels that it shapes your brain in a certain way. And he and I have pretty spirited debates because I really believe that early stage education should be focused on science and math. And I think critical thinking and tight logical thinking is a skill that all of us could benefit from. And that's what I tell people is if you're getting ready to enter your undergraduate programs or your graduate programs, take as many classes as you can that will help you be a better critical thinker.
Another great question from our audience. What could the rise of AGI mean for our society and economy? Will it open new doors for and new opportunities for everyone, or will it be the digital divide? Is that going to deepen?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and thank you for putting it forward. One of the things that I was talking at this event at a dinner last night with a person, and he was saying, well, AGI could be here tomorrow. And I said, well, if it is, we're in real trouble, because we don't have any of the structures to handle it. We don't have any of the governance. We can't control the data. If there's this whole thing that Ray Kurzweil goes off on, but he didn't create it. It was a guy named Cook in the 60s that created this scenario where there was an AGI that was just ever increasingly getting more intelligent by the second, and no one could keep up with it. So, if we had it today, we would be doomed. And that's part of the reason why I'm so excited about it being 100 years from now, is that I'm hoping that when we do get to it, and we will get to it, that we have the right structures and governance and laws and rules and regulations and norms in place to use it productively. So I don't I think it's going to, if it's handled right, when it comes about, it's going to make things better for all of us. If we have, like I said, the regulations, norms, laws, data, and the right mindset about how to treat it and use it, then it's going to be a great thing. But if we don't, it's going to exacerbate all the bad things that we see today. The digital divide, the disempowerment of certain parts of society, people using it for ill-gotten gains. You could easily see this going very positively or very badly.
Any technology or technological advancement runs that risk, I think, right?
Sure.
It really does. Uh, Talk to me as you were putting this book together. What has surprised you?
What surprised me was, as we all know, the last 2.5 years has been the era of exponential change and Gen AI and all that. And I actually started to doubt myself. I'm like, wow, maybe I am a luddite. Maybe I don't understand what's going on. Maybe I just don't get it. Maybe I'm not seeing something that everybody else is seeing. So, the book itself is 400 plus pages. It's got over 300 footnotes. Lots of different people cited and sourced in the book. And I came away from the book even more convinced that I was right. So that kind of surprised me.
And we got plenty of questions. We'll answer a lot of those in the chat after this. The path to AGI, your fifth book that you put together, and I know it just came out, but knowing you, you probably have something in mind already for the sixth book. And really, where do you see this going?
We've already hinted at it. We've already teased it. The sixth book is going to be on critical thinking and the need
Excellent.
for it and the benefit of it and the need for education to step forward and support it.
Path to AGI, where can people buy your book?
Amazon.
Wonderful. John, it's always a pleasure to sit down and pick your brain. Thank you so much for the support you've given me and my book and James Duane Group. And please go out and get The Path to AGI. You won't be disappointed. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, JD. See you soon.